welcome to you all. My name is Namita Datta, and I head a global program that's called Solutions for Youth Employment here at the World Bank. Um, a lot of you are colleagues from the bank, so you know this, but also uh, we have a lot of colleagues from our partner network who are joining today. So S4Y, you all know, is a global program. We have a large number of partners. And what is particularly exciting about this program is that we have some really interesting and strong private sector partners, and two of them are here with us today. So I'm really excited about this session. So in XRY, one of the things we do every month, we have a session like this, and the idea is to shine the spotlight on a new idea or a new innovation. And sometimes it's not a brand new idea, but there's a new way of doing it, which itself is an innovation. And the idea is to sort of stimulate that sort of creativity and discussion, and also um, see how we can form new types of alliances, new types of partnerships. Maybe there's an idea that another partner has, and we have something else, and together it could be a win-win approach. So that's the idea behind some of these sessions, to really try and focus on new ideas, to learn from them. And we try and in these sessions try to keep the conversation on the how to, on the practical side of things, like how does one actually do this? And what are some issues that we run into as we start doing it? Because it's all nice to say, let's do this, but we all know that the proof of the pudding, it's really when the rubber hits the road that you run into these issues. So um, today's session, we are going to talk about internships. Now, all of us, I know this is a community that cares about youth employment. We know that internships and apprenticeships, these are instruments that a lot of us are familiar with. We use them like on a daily basis, right, as part of our youth employment programs, because they fulfill a really important market failure. So on the side of the youth, this is a young person just been trained, but has no clue what it means to show up in a workplace. What does that mean? How do I talk to my boss? How do I show up on time? What does it mean to actually be an employee? We don't know that. And all of us started there. But you have to start somewhere as a young person. Um, on the side of the employer, also, it's a challenge, right? I mean, you want to hire young people, but frankly, you don't know much about them. You have a CV. The CV doesn't say much except a bunch of degrees, perhaps, but it doesn't tell you how this person is actually going to show up in the workplace. And so you think it's a risky decision to hire somebody young and inexperienced. Um, so it's a gap, right? It's a gap on both sides. So internships and apprenticeships provide an opportunity for the employer to get to know this young person and see if this is a good fit. And for the young person, it's a really interesting opportunity to actually get a feel for the workplace, pick up a few ideas, pick up a few real life skills, and ultimately, that internship may turn into a formal job, but maybe not. If it doesn't turn into a formal job, you've still picked up some important skills. So we all know this is an important instrument. But with the past couple years, as we've rapidly changed to a virtual way of working, the question we're asking ourselves here in this session is, can you do internships virtually? Can you actually even do them? Um, and if you do, because we know from this very talented set of panelists that are going to talk to us today that it is possible to do it, but how do you actually do it? And what are some challenges that you face in doing this? So I'm so delighted that we have three really wonderful speakers who are going to share with us their experience. We have Catherine Rowan, who heads human resources from Nestle. And also, she's secretary of a very interesting, I'm really very fascinated by the experiment that Catherine and other colleagues in the private sector have led, just to create an alliance of private sector companies who care about the youth employment agenda. I've been part of some of their meetings, and I just see some wonderful energy. And it's always very inspiring for me to see how some of our corporate colleagues have the right thing in their heart, like they want to do the right thing. And so Catherine is here with us today, and she'll talk a little bit about what this alliance of companies, why they actually wanted to create something called a virtual internship program. And then Mino Bart from the Adecco Group, also an S4Y partner, will share with us a little bit the how and the what. So Catherine will talk about the why, and Mino will talk about the what, like what are these virtual internship guidelines that this set of companies is trying to experiment with. And then and Neil Higgins from the ILO will share with us why he thinks this is an important experiment and really looking at it from the labor market perspective, what role this can play. And then I'm also really excited that we have two young people with us who are actually going through this virtual internship program. And I'll introduce them a bit later. It's Andrea, who is doing her internship with CMAC, and Shingirira, who is from Nestle. I think I butchered your name, is it? Um, Shingirirai. Maybe you'll correct me when you come on.
All right.
I have done a terrible job with your name, perhaps, but you'll correct me when you come on. But with this, I'm going to hand it over to Catherine to kick us off. Firstly, a very, very warm welcome to you all, the panelists, and also to all of our other colleagues and friends who are joining. So, Catherine, over.
Thank you so much, Namita, and it's great to be amongst all of you here today to talk about a topic that I'm really, really passionate about. I mean, I think we've all heard the statistics about young people being adversely impacted by the pandemic, but I can tell you, as a mother of two children in their early 20s, I can tell you I've had firsthand experience with how tough the last couple of years has been on that generation of young people. And this is why I'm so proud to be working um, at Nestle and with the Global Alliance. Nestle has been actively working to support young people since, for a long time, but ever since 2013, when it was clear that we had employment issues with young people. And I'm so proud of the commitment that we made as a company to support 10 million young people to have access to economic opportunities by 2030. And I've been really thrilled to, over the last couple of years, since 2018, to work with like-minded organizations as part of the Global Alliance for Youth. I mean, the Alliance it's a business-driven movement, 25 companies passionate about working together and helping young people. It's what knits us all together to come together once a month and talk about how we continue to move the agenda forward to really help young people get the necessary skills to thrive in the world of work, both today but also for tomorrow. And as a group, we represent about 1.5 million people around the globe, so we feel like we can really truly make an impact. We think that by mobilizing the business community through the Alliance, that we can help young people on a much larger scale and have a big impact, and just create bridges between the skills that the today's context, but also the skills that are going to be needed for tomorrow. So in addition to our private sector partners, we have some other great partners that we collaborate with, and many who are here today, including the World Bank, Solutions for Youth Employment, the ILO, and the Global Apprenticeship Network. We have been very, very lucky to have an active group of engaged volunteers. And we've been focused on in four key areas. One is the whole area of dual education. This is where we focus on advocacy, but also on the implementation of dual education programs, such as apprenticeship programs, internship programs, and traineeships. And it was this committee that actually did the work on the virtual internship guideline that we're going to be talking about today. We're also working in the space of digital inclusion, and this is an increasingly important topic given the reality of the digital divide nowadays. And then the third area of focus is around soft skills, and we know that without a doubt this is a very, very important. It's a kind of a critical success factor for young people, but people of any age in the world of work. And then finally, communications, because we really want to spread the word around how we support young people. So how did we develop these virtual internship guidelines? Well, it started at Nestle back at the beginning of the pandemic. So it was, think back 2 years ago around this time, it was 2020. And it was really a response to the need to virtualize the internship experience. We as you know, we're a major employer. We employ about 250,000 people around the world. And we've had a commitment to internship from a very for a very long time. And of course, with our Swiss roots, it's been part of our DNA for a very long time. But we realized that during the pandemic that there were a lot of companies that were simply canceling their internship programs when offices went virtual. And it was clear to us that because of our commitment, because we felt we owed it to young people, we just said we couldn't let young people down. So we set ourselves a task to start to figure out how to do this remotely. Now, there were two markets, two countries, two Nestle markets that started to do this, the work in this space. One was Mexico, and the other one was Canada, and both had their own unique approach. And operated in their own context. So what we did is we shared best practices across the HR community with line managers. We worked on the guideline to kind of make it more robust and applicable. We shared it with HR colleagues in other regions like European Union and the Middle East and Asia and Africa for them to really provide their comments and feedback so that it was more of a global approach, so to speak. We then took it to the dual education team in the Global Alliance. This is the alliance of 25 companies. And collectively, we decided to revise it to further improve it. So it's gone through quite a robust process of review. So Nestle, Adecco, and Cemex actually led the project. But we also had some amazing inputs from several other companies like Firmenich and Cargill, as well as Mercer. And all of those companies have been actively involved in dual education for many years. I have to say it has been great to have Adecco as a partner in this project because they've really, really brought to the table their consultancy expertise and a completely different and a complementary way to look at the topic. And it was also really important to have valuable comments from organizations like the ILO. And so we're so happy that they're with us here today. We have representatives from both organizations who are going to talk to us about this, and looking also forward to hearing from our interns. So why are we here today? Really to share our journey and our experience and to spread the word so other companies will implement virtual internship programs. And we hope that, with fingers crossed, the end of the pandemic is in sight. And that we'll be able to host face-to-face internship programs. But that being said, with the virtual and hybrid work sort of reality being here to stay, we think that these guidelines are going to live on, and they're no doubt going to improve the quality of the first on-the-job experience for young people. So I'll stop there. I'm sure you want to hear all about the actual guidelines themselves. It's been a pleasure being with you here today, and I'm happy to hand over to Menno Bart from the Adecco Group, who's been a founding member of the Global Alliance and also actively part of shaping the internship guideline.
Thanks so much, Catherine, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone on the call. Indeed, the pleasure is all mine. I will also share a few slides with you. Share. I hope you can now see this. And now I still need to make sure that I can also see you. So there we go again. Indeed, the making the future work for everyone is our corporate motto almost. And I think it's the perfect illustration of why we chose to, first of all, join the Alliance for Youth, which Nestle really deserves a lot of credit for setting this up, enabling this, and then driving the Alliance to become so successful. And it's always a pleasure to work with Catherine and the team to see what new thing we can bring to the world of work. And so let me say a few words about the Adecco Group, because maybe some of you know us from basically providing flexible placement or agency work solutions. But what I want to underline here is that we really position ourselves as this global HR solutions company, which also illustrates why we are so heavily invested in the topic of workplace learning, internships, apprenticeships, you name it, in a world with such big skill shortages and labor market mismatch. It's crucial to make sure that we create that connection between the world of education and in our view, internships are exactly one way of doing that in a very adequate way. Now, as Catherine said, of course, the pandemic really meant every company, every worker had to adjust in a massive way. And just as with many of those adjustments in other areas, whether it's with regards to remote work or with regards to the way that we organize our business processes, for internships, we saw a similar development where we thought, hey, wait a second, something that was born out of urgent necessity might actually have a longer term value and something that we might want to keep on doing, even if we are still able to return to the office. Because, for example, you want to attract interns from a different or a larger talent pool outside of a place where you happen to have a production facility, or because someone might not be able to travel due to, for example, disability or due to any other factor. And so the idea is really a virtual internship is completely remote, not physically present in their host organization. But just as with working remotely, you can still be a full part of the team. However, we also realized that something that was born out of this necessity and that in some cases might have been acceptable during the pandemic is not a good way of continuing in the long term. And so we started thinking about, okay, how do we actually, what should you make sure to keep in mind in order to make sure that this virtual internship is a good experience for all? So how do you ensure that there's equal access to it? How do you organize it in a good way? What are practical tips, etc.? And one of the ways to think about this, I think there's two elements here. First of all, of course, there are quality elements that are valid for all internships, and then there's the specific virtual part. And for that first part, so where it's about the quality of internship experience per se, that is not included in these guidelines. We actually chose to sort of integrate an already existing framework. That's the Sprint framework. And this is a project that was funded by the Erasmus Plus program of the EU, and where the Datta group was one of the partners. And I'll say a few more words about that on the next slide to show what exactly it is. But to be clear, so these virtual guidelines that we now develop within the Alliance for Youth are specifically focusing on that virtual part. What do you need to keep in mind specifically when having a virtual internship? And that, of course, also means that these guidelines, they are never going to be the only thing that you need to keep into account when you organize a virtual internship locally. There might be specific rules or regulations. There might be specific frameworks that you need to implement. Now, on the Sprint project, so Sprint is actually an acronym which stands for Standardized Best Practices about Internships. And it was created by 7 partners. So there was a university, there were youth organizations, there was a trade union involved, it was the French standardization body, AFNOR, as well as us from the Datta. And we created a European quality framework for internships between 2017 and 2020. It also includes an online quality assessment for employers of interns who want to double check how they measure up against this set of criteria. And we basically listed 8 quality criteria in the area of recruitment, the fact that there needs to be a written agreement between the parties, there needs to be some sort of remuneration. The internship obviously needs to include some form of skills acquisition. The person cannot just be cheap labor force. What kind of tutoring or mentoring needs to be in place, something on career development and employment, which says that although there might not be a guarantee, it would be good for the intern to be supported in thinking about their next career move, either within the company or elsewhere. Some criteria around work environment, working conditions, obviously those need to be comparable to their colleagues when it comes to safety and things like this, social protection and insurance. If you would be interested, I'm happy to share a link to the Sprint resources as well afterwards in case you haven't seen those. And then the actual virtual internship guideline. And what we try to do is set out what makes a virtual internship successful. Well, first of all, for the internship, for the intern themselves, the fact that they are virtual means that they might have additional accessibility. But that does mean that there is a virtual selection process, so you need to think about how to shape that. There are additional advantages when it comes to the flexibility in organizing one's time, just as with all of us working remotely, where you might be a little bit more flexible in doing your groceries over your lunch break, or whichever way you organize your day. And as I said, the intern is able to gain work experience from anywhere. If you are in Western Ukraine these days, at least you can still continue your internship anywhere else, regardless of the terrible circumstances you might be in. And of course, there is the added value of enhanced digital skills. So that's a bonus almost over an in-person. For our host organization, we also realized that there are some success factors that you need to take into account. Design and adapt the work around the virtual nature of the internship, so that you might need to adjust the assignments that you give the intern, or you might need to adjust the way that you shape those assignments. You need to give a specific attention on certain competencies over others, both in how you recruit these interns, but then also how you develop, or how you support those interns in their development. It might mean you need to focus more time on the interns' sort of independence and the way that, and making sure that they can organize their own work. Because you won't be sitting next to them all day long looking at whether they are still busy or looking at what tasks they are currently working on. So you might need to think about how they, first of all, if they are able to do that, and second of all, how you support them in doing that. And there is, yeah, I think, and that's something that I personally am experiencing these days. I'm also working with a new intern just for 3 weeks now, mostly virtual. And you need to very actively think about how do you support someone in developing their professional network within the company? How do you make sure that you actually have enough social interactions with someone rather than just shoving a few tasks their way and waiting until they might be done with it? You want to make sure that they are really embedded in the social structure of the company as well, even if it's a remote experience. And then, of course, the working equipment. You can't always expect the intern to bring their own laptops, phones, etc. So you might need to think in advance about how you ensure that they have access to your network and things like that. A very practical point, but nevertheless very. I think I'll stop there. I'm happy to answer any questions, of course, if there are any, but I want to leave plenty of time. So thank you.
Thanks, Menno. Over to you, yeah.
To me?
Yeah.
Uh, Hello, I'm Neil O'Higgins, and I work for the ILO's Employment Analysis Unit. And for some years now, we've been looking at what makes for good internships in particular, how to improve the internships as an integration mechanism for young people. And so I'm going to offer a few comments in the context of the virtual internships guidelines that we've just been hearing about. Clearly, internships can provide a useful way into the world of work for young people. Some internships are more useful than others, and so I'll say one or two things about what factors tend to make internships as a whole more useful for young people, and then I'll say something about the relevance and the particular issues regarding virtual internships. This is based on recent work that we published last year in a book on internships and employability. So what makes for a good internship? One thing that emerges very clearly from the literature is that actually paid internships are on average associated with much better post-internship labor market outcomes than unpaid ones. In terms of the paid, young people who participate in paid internships tend to do better once they leave the internship than those that participate on unpaid ones. But it's not so much the fact of it is the fact of being paid rather than the size of payment which matters most. So paying interns can broaden the pool of candidates from which one draws, but it also is an indicator of other things like the seriousness with which a firm is taking the internship program and more generally the structure of internship. So the fact that it is the fact of being paid rather than the size of payment tends to suggest that it is it's the structure of the internship which is playing a key role rather than the payment per se. And in fact, one finds that other characteristics of an internship beyond payment are also associated with greater impact. One needs to have, the key here clearly is young people need to acquire some competence, skills, as was mentioned before. So young people need to get something from the internship to make it worthwhile. That requires a certain duration. Secondly, mentorship proves to be very important in determining post-program outcomes, and I'll come back to that. And some other characteristics associated with the formalization and the structure of internships such as certification. So the skills acquired during internship can then be transferred once the internship is completed. So the bottom line here is it's the structure and competency acquisition which drives the beneficial outcomes of internship programs. What are the implications for virtual internships? Well, okay, so to summarize, formal structured internships are associated with much better outcomes than ones which are less formal. Characteristics such as payment, mentorship, certification, and so on lead to greater positive impact. So these elements tend to build and also work together in order to provide better post-internship outcomes. I'd say that, we've seen, as was already mentioned, the pandemic has emphasized this already present trend to more and more, say, virtual interaction. In particular, pandemic has meant that we're all interacting virtually. And this has implications also in terms of the form of interaction. Now, with virtual internships, the lack of a face-to-face interaction, whilst this creates a lot of flexibility, you don't have to be physically in the same space, it does mean that the interaction that does take place and the role of structure, and I think in particular the specific element of the guidance that I would focus on is mentorship and guidance that the interns receive is all the more crucial in order to make sure that the young person is integrated, feels part of what's going on. I would just finish up with a caution note on scale. The nowadays internships are more and more widespread. It's not uncommon for young people to participate in multiple internships on their way into, let's say, a longer term employment. This can mean that the relative advantage of doing any specific internship is reduced, but it reinforces this notion that the internship quality and this associated competence acquisition becomes all the more important. So the bottom line here is, and I think the guidelines lay this out pretty clearly, is that in order to make for a good internship, to be a useful experience for young people, there has to be a strong focus on internship quality, in particular, and competence acquisition from young people. And in the virtual world, the issue of this interaction, the mentorship in particular, is of key importance. And with that, I would pass the floor back, if I can stop sharing. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Neil, for highlighting some of the points that actually Menno was beginning to outline. The fact that there are these 8 criteria, and then you further emphasized really correctly, I think, the importance of making it paid, and just the fact that it's paid is a signal to the intern that I'm being taken seriously, and that itself generates a certain type of behavior. So that's a really important point. And I was also struck by your comment about, the more structured, the better. And I guess the more virtual it is, the more the need for a structure. And then the one thing I was curious about, and I wanted your reaction on this before I invite our 2 young colleagues to give us like a first-hand experience, but I wondered, just asking the 3 of you, I agree with the fact that it should be paid and it should be structured, that you have to give importance to quality, the certification bit. The one question I have is about insurance. I think both of you mentioned providing social insurance and benefits to interns. How does the private sector react to that, considering that it's really this whole sort of legal benefits and all of that around giving somebody a formal job upfront versus having them come on as an intern? Being an intern gives the private sector a little bit of comfort that they could experiment with youth A and youth B if they don't know them. How does the private sector, and also to Catherine and Menno, how do your HR colleagues react to that? The aspect of providing social insurance to your intern. I don't know if any of you want to go first, just to respond to that.
Catherine?
I can jump in. No, absolutely. I mean, the way we've approached it in our company is very much on a local basis. So we've really taken into consideration what the local context is and what the local requirements are around paying our local interns. So we don't have a one size fits all necessarily, but we do try to do our utmost to make sure, well, first of all, the bar is set as what is the legal requirement. And we always pay our interns. And so from our standpoint, it's whatever is normally expected in the country where the internship is being offered. That tends to be how we've approached the situation. And the fact is, we know that we want to be able to pay them a decent wage, because that they don't need to be worrying about that. They need to be focused on the internship itself. And not focused on the money necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, I can only agree with that. Maybe one additional, or actually 2 additional points. First of all, it differs from one country to the next, but in some countries, interns are still in university, right, or in their education, and in other countries they actually can't be in education and doing an internship simultaneously. But either way, when you are still a student, then you might already have social protection from other angles. And so that's just to illustrate how different the situation can be from one country to the next. But in general, I fully agree with Catherine that, yeah, we need to make sure that an intern is not subject to all sorts of risks that other workers are not. And they just need to make sure that at least for health and accident and things like this, that they are well.
Yeah, maybe I can just quickly. I mean, the point. I think an intern is not. I mean, part of the point for internship is it's flexible and it's different from employment. And also within the ILO, we have interns, and they are explicitly not employees. They are trainees, if you like, or more akin to trainees. And it's a work experience period. So the I think. I mean, the general point is about work is about structure and taking trying to make a quality experience with some competence acquisition for the young person. But at the same time, it's also you want to maintain the flexibility and have some basic protections for young people. For example, in case they have accidents. This is, of course, is perhaps less of an issue. The specific insurance aspect is perhaps less of an issue for virtual internships by virtue of the fact that one is not actually in the workplace. But in any case, it's for me the point is more about the sort of general structure of the thing, and whilst being clear that this is not the same as an employment contract. It's not something different. It's a period of training and work experience, work-based learning, we call it.
Yeah, exactly. And we need more and more of this as the world of work changes so rapidly. I want to turn to our young colleague, Andrea and Shingirai, who are both interns, and ask them, how has the experience been for you? Maybe Andrea, you can go first. Just share a little bit about how this experience of being a virtual intern has been for you, and what might have been some challenges that you may have faced, and also maybe share what you learned.
Thank you, Namita. Well, first of all, hello everyone. My name is Andrea from CEMEX Global Headquarters. And before answering your question, I want to mention that it was really interesting hearing the topics Mino and Niall shared, because are topics that I have already been thinking as an intern. And well, I guess that since the beginning, I knew my internship would be virtual, and I couldn't help but thinking about all the challenges I was going to face in this new normal. But I think that after almost 14 months of living this experience, I have been able to improve and also develop several skills. And I think this has been an opportunity for me, or I have been able to do it thanks to the interactions I have, most of all with my manager and my colleagues, and most of all also studying the materials they provide, because I guess picking their brains was and still is like essential for my professional development, to like still grow in the company. And also something very important as my experience in CEMEX, I think, are mistakes, because mistakes are another factor that has helped me develop these skills. And I want to share this quote that maybe you have already heard or maybe not, but it says, rock bottom will teach you lessons that mountaintops never will. And I am not ashamed to share with you that I have made mistakes along the way of my internship, because I am a true believer that when you make mistakes, the learning is more valuable and you can grow thanks to it.
Thanks, Andrea. I couldn't agree with you more about the value of making mistakes, and ideally, an internship should provide you with that option to make mistakes. it's almost compulsory. You should make mistakes, and if you haven't, then you haven't learned enough. But I want to pick on that point a bit more. But before that, I just wanted to go to Shingiri Rai. First, you need to correct me in terms of how I've pronounced your name, and if I've mispronounced it.
Okay, hi, I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay, so firstly, I've heard so many pronunciations of my name that at times I'm also not sure how to say it.
I'm so
But I
sorry.
normally go with Shingi, so Shingi is fine. My full name is Shingiri Rai. Let me just share my screen. I'll try to go through it as fast as possible. Just let me know when you can see my screen.
We can see it.
Okay, awesome. So my name is Shingi, and I was brought in August of last year under the Nestle Needs Youth Initiative as a programmer. Back then, I reported to data analytics. Now I report to HR under the learning technology. So I started it while I was still busy with my studies. And for that reason, I have a number of things that I can really note as pros for the virtual internship. The first one was there was really no geographical restrictions. So for that reason, we could work from any location without any need for relocation. So our home was our office in essence. So that was great in the sense that even in the midst of my studies, from whichever town I was, I could still work for Nestle. It also brought forth a lot of self-organization. So the fact that we had a lot of independence and generally autonomy and flexibility, there wasn't really as much micromanagement, which is good when you're still trying to learn the ropes. And I mean, quite frankly, it came in right in the aftermath of a global pandemic. So there was really a need for remote work capabilities. So a virtual internship was a plus in that regard. And there was also like a lot of meaningful networking, professional networking. There are a lot of people that we got to meet throughout this whole process, who is to, chat with whenever we're stuck up to this point. So that was actually a huge benefit. Also had a really flexible work-life balance, which allowed us to juggle our studies and also prioritize our productivity hours. So, for example, if you work more at night, you could do that, which was really an important thing that was brought forth by the concept of the internship being virtual. And most importantly, it was cost effective. I mean, there was no need for us to commute. There was no need for us to buy food, be in a certain time, which particularly for students is a huge plus. So that really helped a lot in terms of the virtual internship. But however, we could say that, for example, the time differences were a lot. So in as much as it was good that we had this pool of candidates from all over the world, it was in a sense a double-edged sword because some of us found out the hard way that time differences are a thing. You set up a meeting, you say it's for 10, you log in, there's no one there, then you ping them, then they respond 6 hours later, they're like, oh, bruh, I just woke up. So yeah, the time difference was really an issue. And for me, I can say that, there are a lot of introverted interns out there who are like, why don't you mention that the upside of having a virtual internship was I didn't have to deal with office drama? But for me, it's actually quite the opposite. I can't really say that I got to experience that office culture. We are social beings, so that absence of going to sing happy birthday for a colleague, it really feels like something was lacking in that regard. So overall, I can say going forward, what I feel like there's room for improvement when it comes to virtual internship is structuring it so that there's that job space satisfaction. For me, it was great because I was a developer, so there are a lot of things that I got to see, like apps and projects that I had done that I saw to completion. So that provides that sort of job satisfaction, which I think is core if virtual internships are to go forward. And a second issue is duration. So at least make them a feasible duration. I would advise at least 6 months because last year we had a 3 months one. it was great. But the fact that there are some projects that we couldn't see to completion because there wasn't really enough time. And also the fact that it's short, it's like a month or two, makes it feel like you're there, you make a couple of cool apps, you do all this stuff, and then you get dumped 2 months down the line. So I really think the duration has to be a bit longer and more visible. So yeah, that's just a rundown of my experience with regards to visual internships.
I really enjoyed listening to you, Shingi. I think that was a very thoughtful set of remarks because you gave us both sides of the picture, and you shared, a young person's perspective. I was struck by how you said that it gave you more autonomy. You didn't really want to be micromanaged. I can totally get that. But also, I was also struck by the point you made about culture, and that actually connects to a comment also in the chat. And I think you're right. Yeah, there's something about singing happy birthday for a colleague, just collecting in the hallway and just chatting with your colleagues, picking up issues like, okay, this particular colleague child is sick these days, or just the softer aspect of just human connection, which perhaps would be missing. And I've thought about that too, over COVID. Like, we've also had young team members join our team, and even interns join. And I've often thought that the barrier, and Andrea talked about making mistakes, the barrier for a young person to ask silly questions. You have a bunch of silly questions when you're joining a new workplace, right? I mean, which you're so afraid to ask because you're so clueless sometimes, and yet you need to ask, and yet it's so awkward to ask. And these are best asked in the hallway with a colleague, or best asked over a coffee with another colleague or with a mentor, but not to schedule a Zoom conversation with your boss and ask that bunch of. Right? It's just the barrier to do that is so much higher virtually. But I really appreciated the balanced perspective that you gave. I wanted to go back to some of the questions that are coming up in the chat. And the one in particular, which is sort of building on this point that Shingi also highlighted about absorbing company culture, the culture of the place, like how we talk to each other, how we, like in the bank, it's a big thing for somebody young who's joining to learn, how do you talk to a government client? Like, how do you actually, there's a whole sort of softer skill to it. So how do you address that, just from your perspective, Catherine, and like, how are you yeah, just that. And the second question, which somebody asked in the chat, and I was thinking also, because I know that a lot of my colleagues in the bank, the first question I think a lot of my colleagues will ask is that, okay, so this was adapted from a European set of guidelines, which is why I really wanted to hear Neil's perspective, because he gets the developing country aspect of it also. But how much of a challenge would this be in a more developing part of the world, where there would be challenges with the bandwidth, for example? So just any sort of comments on that. I'll hand it over to you first, Catherine, and any of you want to respond.
Sure. Maybe I'll just jump on the culture question. I think it's a really important one, because that's the kind of thing that you do get in person. You get a better feel for that as you walk down the halls of an organization and you see how people interact. But what we've tried to do is really put a big focus on onboarding and making sure that there's and it gets back to what Niall was saying about the structure, right? That it's a very structured approach to making sure that that those people who are coming, new folks, our new interns coming into the organization, have a very clear sense of what our purpose and values and what we believe in. And then I think so that's one thing. Onboarding with the right people is also important, so they get to have that interaction. But the other thing is giving folks space to talk amongst themselves and to have open spaces for there to be discussions on certain topics. I think that's an important thing, which kind of breaks the breaks the barrier, so to speak, and enables those crazy questions that Andrea was talking about. That it's really important to have that space to do that, a safe space to be able to have those conversations. So I think there are ways to create. There's onboarding. There's creating a sense of community. There's the coaching as well, and the good strong supervision. But also saying to folks, listen, it's important that you have a sense of community here so that we can learn from each other. And I think that will go a long way to building culture.
I mean, one thing I would add to that is I think a lot of the challenges with virtual internship are exactly the same as with remote work in person. And so any team that works in remote locations might have a challenge in exactly meeting each other for a birthday or things like this. The thing that makes it specific, of course, for interns is that they might be a bit more vulnerable in the sense that they don't have a lot of experience of how a normal office in normal times, what that actually looked like. And so, yeah, indeed, I agree with Catherine. You need to be more intentional about how you organize these things, because it is a challenge, I think, for anyone. Maybe on the location question, and I also saw the question in the chat. I mean, the basic infrastructure, of course, yeah, that is a very difficult thing to organize virtual internships or even virtual work when you don't have a good internet infrastructure, a good IT infrastructure. So there, yeah, I'm not quite sure if there is a workaround for that. Nevertheless, as soon as that is in place, I don't see why this model couldn't work in any part of the world.
Perhaps maybe I can just quickly, I'm actually a mentor within my own organization within the ILO. I have been for some years, and I was just reflecting on the fact that this last year I was mentoring a colleague, and she was new to the ILO. And so it was quite a different experience, quite apart from the fact that we never actually physically met. It was quite a different experience because it was a lot about transmitting the organization culture and basic organizational information that she would have naturally picked up if she'd been in the office. So that again emphasizes the importance of mentorship. The other thing is that, as Bart mentioned, that I mean, there's a lot of the challenges are the same for general teleworking. And one of the things that we've been doing in the ILO, or some parts of the ILO have been doing, is that organizing virtual coffees with a requirement that you don't talk about work issues, or in this kind of sort of organization, which is a bit unusual for we have lots of meetings and they're always about work. But this is and this can be a little artificial, but trying to create those spaces where one can transmit these, let's say, less formal aspects of the thing, I think can be very important and certainly worth thinking about.
Like that, structure the unstructured time. So yeah, that completely makes sense. I also wanted to also ask another question, which is in the chat, about more vulnerable populations like refugees or people with disabilities. And that's sort of linked with also something Shingi said that struck me. What's the word he used? Driven. He said people who are, isn't driven the word he used? Yes, people who are driven. And that made me think about people who may be naturally more introverted. Like you have to be driven to structure this unstructured time with your mentor, or driven to ask a question. But people who tend to be more shy, or people who are introverts, and particularly people who have otherwise other disadvantages, like who may have disabilities or who may be vulnerable for other reasons. What else should we be doing? I don't know if any of you have any reactions to that.
Well, if I might start there, I think yes, virtual might raise additional barriers for some groups of people, but it might actually remove them for other groups. If you have mobility challenges, for example, it's much easier to stay in your own home and get behind your own computer than to actually have to move physically to another location. And so I think you need to be aware, but just as with any other form of inclusion in the workplace, you need to very likely make sure that you adapt to those limitations in order for people to still be able to be part of this. I think virtual can raise opportunities as much as it can raise challenges for people with certain challenges.
Yeah, and particularly, I see a point there. Particularly also women with childcare responsibilities, the additional flexibility, and the point that we heard about the work-life balance. It's a mixed.
Or men with childcare duties.
Okay, good. Yes, exactly. And so we had another session the other day about working with people with disabilities, and somebody raised this exact point that you're raising, that some of them felt with the mobility constraint, but also they felt um, that they can continue to work without being just suddenly visible with all of with the challenges that they face. So somebody made this point about how the virtual world frees them up in some sense. I wonder if there are other questions in the chat. I see there's a lot of interest in the report that you're mentioning, Neil. So just to say to everybody logged in today, and I think also my colleagues who would want to listen to the recording, that we'll share the slides that were presented today and also the resources that Neil has kindly posted in the chat. Anything else from anyone? Or any other thoughts from any of the panelists or even our young people? Andrea?
Yeah, maybe I can compliment, yes. I just want to share like my learnings or what I have learned from all this experience. And I think I related 100% with what Mino said about the factors that make virtual internship successful. And I think there are two things that I have considered about my experience and are very important, which are willingness to carry out the experience and flexibility most of all. I think that the job position and the responsibilities that come with it were the keys to making the final decision of taking this big step. And I think it's not about only getting the experience checked or done. It's about enjoying it and knowing that I was going to be able to apply my knowledge that I have from university or as a student. At the end of the day, I think that that is what motivates me to be able to share my knowledge and also to apply it in my daily work. Moreover, flexibility was a key item for me since I consider, and that is something that you all discuss in this meeting, but I consider that it's not about how much time you spend on the computer. It's about results. It's about whether you're meeting your goals or tasks on time and that you are actually delivering optimal results during like this process.
So just out of curiosity, Andrea, what kind of tasks did you do?
So my responsibilities are most of all of internal communication. I study marketing and I really like to apply my knowledge to the things that I do on my day-to-day basis, right? And are most of all like designs, communications, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I was just wondering whether there might be certain types of tasks that may lend themselves more to sort of the virtual world or the virtual internship model versus others. But I think we have run out of time, and I'm so grateful for all of you to have joined today, Catherine, Mino, Neil, Andrea, and Shingi. This was really wonderful, and I'm just delighted with this initiative that you've taken, and I'm curious if other companies are, after Cimex and Nestle, if there are other companies that might follow suit and provide more opportunities to young people to really get a sense of what it is to be in a workplace, even though we can't sometimes be physically in the same place. So big thank you to you all. We will share the recording of this with our network and also share the slides that you presented. So thank you very much. And I hope all of you have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.